The sun beat down on cracked dirt, and the flies had already started to swarm. People walked past, shielding their eyes, not out of mercy, but discomfort. He wasn't just a horse. He was a warning, skin stretched thin over bone. No water, no name, and nobody cared, until one man, dust-covered and silent, didn't keep walking. He knelt, and that one quiet gesture would unravel secrets no one at the fairground saw coming. The heat pressed down like a weight, thick and unmoving. Dust swirled low over the auction ring, catching in the cracks of old boots and dry lips. Lot 82 had been dragged out just before noon, right when the sun turned cruel. The horse didn't stand. He couldn't. He lay there, sides heaving, legs folded awkwardly beneath a frame that had once known power. His coat was the color of ash, dulled by grime and old sweat, patchy in places where flies fed freely. A hush fell, not reverent, but uneasy. People averted their eyes, scuffed the ground, pretended to check their phones. One boy asked his father why the horse was lying down. The man didn't answer. Lot 82, the auctioneer muttered, not bothering to lift his hat. No papers, no ride history. We'll start at 50 hell, $20 if anyone's feeling generous. Nothing. The silence was loud. He's done for, someone whispered. Put it down. Still, no one moved. And then the stranger stepped forward. No hat, no bitter number, just a worn shirt stuck to his back with sweat, and boots that had seen more than one kind of mud. He didn't look at the auctioneer. He didn't speak. He walked past the crowd like they weren't even there, moved slow, deliberate, and stopped just short of the horse. He knelt, not dramatically, not for show. He just eased down, one knee in the dirt, and rested his hand near the gelding's jaw without touching. The horse flinched, but he didn't pull away. A murmur rolled through the bleachers. Who is that? Is he a vet? Looks like a drifter. The man reached into his pocket, pulled out a ragged handkerchief, and dipped it into the melted ice at the bottom of a forgotten drink cooler. With a quiet patience that made the silence feel holy, he wiped the foam from the horse's mouth. The auctioneer shifted behind the mic, uncertain now. Sir, this lot ain't safe. He ain't mobile." The man looked up once, just once, and something in that gaze stopped the auctioneer mid-sentence. He turned back to the horse. "They left you to die in the heat, didn't they?" he whispered, more breath than words. "But you're still breathing. That counts for something." Nobody bid, nobody laughed, and for the first time all day, the heat didn't feel like the worst thing pressing on that crowd. It was the weight of shame, because they'd all walked past, and he hadn't. He didn't look like he belonged there, not in the way most folks measured it. No name tag, no clipboard assistant trailing behind him with a water bottle and sunscreen, just dust-caked boots, jeans worn white at the knees, and a neck turned red from too many days under a sky that didn't forgive. He had a rolled-up newspaper in one hand, limp from sweat and creases, like it had been read a dozen times or not at all, and no hat. In a town like this, that said something. He didn't walk like a buyer, didn't swagger like the weekend ranchers who showed up in pressed shirts and polished belt buckles. He walked like the ground was familiar, like he didn't need to be introduced to dirt. Someone near the rail muttered, "You see him, no badge, no brand, no boots worth spit, probably just wandered in." A woman with sunglasses too big for her face glanced his way and scoffed, "Can't even afford a hat." But others, older ones quieter, looked a little longer, because the way he'd stared at that horse, it wasn't out of pity, it was something heavier, like recognition, like grief with a long memory. The man hadn't spoken since he knelt beside the gelding, and now, standing, he didn't leave. He stayed close but not too close, letting the horse breathe, letting him feel seen without pressure. Every so often, his fingers twitched near the rolled newspaper, nervous habit or something deeper. No one could tell. The auction staff didn't know what to make of him. He hadn't registered, hadn't signed a bidder's form or asked for a number. And yet, the way he stood there, they hesitated to ask him to leave, like they weren't quite sure if they had the right. Sheriff Danvers, sipping sweet tea near the gates, narrowed his eyes. "You recognize him?" he asked the older man beside him. "Nope," came the reply. but he's looking at that horse like he buried its brother. The man didn't blink when a fly landed on his cheek, didn't flinch when the PA system crackled, just kept his eyes on Lot 82, who had finally raised his head from the dust but hadn't tried to stand. And when the horse looked back, just for a moment, with dull, searching eyes, it was like the whole place forgot where they were. Something passed between them, not hope, not yet, but something ancient, familiar, like the horse knew what it meant to be left behind, and the man, he knew what it meant to come back anyway. The laughter came slow at first, like a fuse burning down, then loud, harsh, and carried by the kind of men who measured worth in boot polish and cattle weight. The man hadn't moved, still standing a few feet from the horse, arms loose by his sides, newspaper now tucked under one arm like it didn't matter anymore. His eyes stayed on Lot 82, who had shifted slightly in the dirt but hadn't yet tried to rise. "Hey," a voice called from the edge of the ring, the kind of voice that belonged to a man who got his hands dirty only on weekends and paid others to do the rest. He wore a pearl snap shirt that hadn't seen a barn in years and boots that looked polished that morning. His hat sat perfect on his head, brim curved just enough to suggest style, not sweat. "You buying or preaching, old-timer?" the man called out, grinning like he'd just told the best joke in town. A few chuckles answered, "'Cause if you're here to start a sermon, maybe wait till Sunday." Some of us got real stock to bid on. Another wave of laughter rolled through the crowd, safe behind bleachers and sunshades. The auctioneer half smiled but didn't step in. Entertainment like this sold drinks. The man didn't blink, didn't look away from the horse. Just reached into his back pocket with one hand and pulled out a piece of paper, creased, yellowed, and folded more times than made sense. He opened it carefully, like it mattered, and held it between two fingers. A check, bank stamped, signed. He didn't lift his voice, didn't raise it an inch. "I ain't here to preach," he said, soft and steady. "I'm here to finish something." The crowd quieted, the laughter died quick. The rancher blinked. Finish what? But the man didn't answer. He walked past him like he didn't exist, stopping at the steps that led to the main office trailer. One of the younger clerks inside stood up uncertainly as the stranger stepped in without being asked. Through the dusty glass, they watched him speak, quiet, direct, placing the check on the desk like it was a fact, not an offer. Outside, the rancher fumed. "Who the hell does he think he is?" Sheriff Danvers didn't answer. He just kept watching the trailer window. Inside, the clerk nodded once, then twice, and took the check with both hands. Back at the ring, Lot 82 had turned his head toward the sound of the office door creaking open again. The man stepped out, no fanfare, no strut, just quiet resolve, like he'd finally scratched a name into a piece of history no one else thought mattered. And that horse, he blinked once, slow, like maybe, just maybe, he knew. The vet didn't look up right away, just kept scribbling notes on a clipboard that had seen its share of hopeless cases. She was young, maybe mid-30s, with sleeves rolled up and a faint line of dust across her cheek. Her stethoscope dangled loose like it had already given up. "You're the one took Lot 82, she asked without ceremony. The man nodded once. She finally looked up, eyes sharp but not unkind. "You got a trailer?" "No." "You got a stable lined up? A vet on call?" "Nope." She sighed, and it came from somewhere deep, like she'd seen too many endings that didn't need to happen. "That horse shouldn't be alive," she said. "Heat stroke, malnourished, lungs sound like paper bags. If you try to move him too far." She didn't finish. The man stepped forward and took the halter from her hands. It was old leather, cracked and dry like everything else about the day. "Then I'll make his last hours kind," he said. The vet blinked, just once. Then she handed him a small bottle. "Electrolytes," she said. "Mix it in water. If he drinks, maybe, you get a miracle." He took it without another word. Back at the edge of the arena, the crowd had thinned. Most folks had already turned their backs and gone on with their day, chasing their next bargain, their next ribbon winner. Lot 82 still lay there, eyes half-lidded, one ear flicking now and then like it still hadn't decided whether to give up. The man approached slowly, crouched beside him again, and set the bucket down. He poured the water gently, added the powder, stirred it with 2 fingers. "Easy," he murmured. "I know it ain't much." The horse didn't move, So the man waited. Minutes passed, then the gelding shifted. A front leg twitched, his muzzle lifted an inch from the dirt, nostrils flaring at the scent of water. When the horse drank, just one slow sip, the man didn't smile, but something in his shoulders eased, like the world had taken half a step back from the edge. Behind him, the vet watched. "He's got fight," she said softly. "No," the man replied, his voice low. "He's got memory." She didn't understand, but she didn't ask. When the horse tried to stand, he stumbled hard, crashed back down. The man didn't flinch, just steadied the halter, and whispered again, "We'll try again when you're ready." It wasn't pity in his voice, it was promise. And as the sun started to fall behind the trees, painting the dust in gold and rust, the man stayed there, kneeling, like time didn't matter anymore, just the horse, and the hours they had left. The thermometer outside the pavilion read 104, but it felt hotter, the kind of heat that curled paint and made sweat sting your eyes before it ever reached your brow. The kind of heat that broke things, slowly, quietly. The man didn't flinch. He'd tied a damp rag around the horse's neck, loose enough not to rub, tight enough to matter. The gelding stood now, barely, legs trembling, head low, breath like a bellows left too long in the fire. Each step forward was a question. Each answer came in the form of a stumble, but the man never let go. They walked through the parking lot, past rows of trucks and trailers, past men with beer cans and dust-covered hats, who paused just long enough to wonder what they were seeing before deciding not to care. No one offered help. No one asked where he was going. He didn't have a trailer. He didn't have a vet team waiting down the road. What he had was rope, time, and a kind of patience most people lost somewhere between the feed bill and the next big win. The man didn't pull. He walked slow, matching the horse's rhythm. When the gelding stopped to breathe, he stopped too. When the sun shifted and their shadows stretched long across the gravel road, he took off his shirt and draped it over the horse's back. "Don't need thanks," he muttered, "just need you to keep trying." They passed a gas station. A kid on a BMX bike watched from the curb, mouth open. A woman filling her tank turned away, like she couldn't bear to witness something so broken, so raw. The horse stumbled again. The man caught him before he fell, using his shoulder like a brace. For a moment, they just stood there, leaning on each other like two ghosts, trying to remember how to be flesh. By the time they reached the shade of an abandoned barn 3 miles out, the horse's legs buckled again. But this time the man let him lay, not in the dirt of a pen, not under the eyes of strangers, but here, in quiet. He soaked another rag in water from an old canteen, pressed it gently to the horse's neck. "Rest, boy," he whispered. "You've done more than most would." The wind picked up, soft and dry. It rustled the weeds, whispered through the warped wood slats. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk called low. He sat beside the horse, back against the barn, legs stretched in the dust, didn't look for an audience, didn't look for approval, because this wasn't rescue for applause. This was loyalty to something half the world had already given up on. And that horse, bones showing, breath slow, had finally stopped trembling. Not from strength, but because for the first time in a long while, he wasn't alone. The sun had dropped just enough to cast long copper shadows through the grass. Crickets stirred in the silence, and the heat, though still heavy, had softened its grip. The man sat cross-legged beside the horse, dust settling on his shoulders like an old coat. He hadn't moved in over an hour. Then came the sound, gravel popping under tires, slow, hesitant. A truck easing off the road like it wasn't sure if it was supposed to stop or not. The man didn't look up until the engine cut. It was an old pickup, sun-bleached red, one mirror held on with baling wire. The windshield had more dust than glass, and something, maybe a piece of a tarp, fluttered loose from the bed. A dog barked once from inside, then quieted like it knew better. The door creaked open, and a woman stepped out. She was maybe 60, maybe more. Hard to tell under the deep-set wrinkles and sun-marked skin. Her jeans were stiff with dirt, her boots cracked, and her knuckles bore scars that didn't come from accidents. They came from work, real work. She glanced at the horse first, then at the man, then back again. "You picked a hell of a day to come back," she said, voice dry as fence post wood. The man didn't answer. She walked closer, slow, not cautious, but careful in the way only people who've seen suffering know how to be. She stopped just outside the circle of shade, squinted through the light. "I know who you are," she said. "Took me a second, but I remember that face. You're from the Carter line, Walter's boy." A long pause. The man gave a faint nod. "And that horse," she added, tilting her head slightly. "I know who he belonged to too, or who he came from anyway." The man's eyes finally met hers. "He's the last one," she said, softer now. "Of Blue's stock. That bloodline was thought lost after the fire, but I'd know that head anywhere. Star on the brow. That's Blue Smoke's bone." He turned toward the horse again, as if hearing it aloud gave form to what he'd already felt. She stepped forward, lowering herself slowly beside him with a grunt and a sigh, pulled a thermos from the truck, poured water into a cap, and set it near the horse's mouth. "They tried to erase it all, didn't they?" she murmured. "The land, the names, the bloodlines. But you can't burn what runs too deep." The man didn't speak. He just reached over, adjusted the halter so it didn't rub the gelding's raw cheek. "You got a plan?" she asked. He shook his head once. She nodded like she expected that, like maybe she'd come knowing it already. "Well," she said, brushing hay off her seat, "you got my truck, and a place to rest if you need it." And for the first time that day, the man didn't carry the weight alone. The house sat quiet at the edge of a wind-worn pasture, its porch sagging like it was tired of holding on. Inside, the walls smelled of cedar, coffee, and years of unspoken stories. The woman moved like she'd lived there all her life. Each floorboard creaked familiar, each drawer opening like it knew what she was after before she touched it. The man waited at the kitchen table, elbows resting on wood faded from sunlight and time. Outside the screen door, the gelding lay resting beneath the shade of an old mesquite, breath steady but shallow. The dog from the truck slept nearby, one ear cocked, just in case. From a cabinet behind the stove, the woman pulled a folded quilt. Tucked beneath it, wrapped in old feed sack burlap, was a box. She carried it over without a word, set it down between them, and flipped the latch. Inside, dusty folders, yellowing envelopes, a rusted spur, and a small black and white photo, faded but sharp enough to make the air feel different. She held it out. "This," she said, "was taken the summer before the fire. That's Blue Smoke, and that's your father with him. Same bone structure, same blaze. Look at the mark." The man took the photo, slow. There it was, a white star on the horse's forehead, crooked, pointed slightly left, like someone had smudged it at birth. Identical to the one that rested now above the brow of the horse outside. "He's not just some rescue," she said. "He's the last one left from a line they tried to erase." He ran a thumb along the edge of the photo. "I remember," he whispered. "My father called him a ghost with fire in his legs." She smiled faintly. They all had fire, but it wasn't just bloodlines. It was how they were raised. Gentle hands, long days, trust first, training second. He nodded. She reached into the box again, pulled out a folded page, typewritten brittle at the corners, a registry document, half burned, edges curled from time and heat. "This one survived in my tack room. The rest," she let the silence speak. "They said it was a barn accident," he murmured. "Some accidents smell like kerosene in silence," she replied. He didn't respond, just stared down at the records like they might still be warm from that fire. "They wiped out everything," she said. "The horses, the names, the history, made it look like it was never there. But this horse, he's proof, breathing, aching proof." Outside, the wind kicked up, brushing the dust from the porch rail and rattling the tin roof. The man leaned back, the photo still in hand. "They can burn barns," he said, "but they can't burn bone." And for the first time since the fairground, his voice carried weight, not just sorrow, but the beginning of return. The knock came just after sunset, when the sky was caught between bruised purple and rust. The porch light flickered once before holding steady. The woman wiped her hands on a dish towel and opened the screen door without needing to ask who it was. Sheriff Harold Dunn stood there, tall, barrel-chested, with a badge more faded than polished and boots that had walked the same streets for 30 years. He didn't take off his hat. "I saw your truck at June's place," he said. "Figured I'd check in." The woman stepped aside, but the man didn't rise from the kitchen table. He stayed where he was, hands folded loosely, eyes calm like a man who'd been waiting for this. Sheriff Dunn nodded once toward the chair across from him. "Mind if I sit?" The man said nothing, which was answer enough. The sheriff took his time settling in, pulling the chair back like he was measuring its weight. Once down, he didn't touch the coffee, just leaned forward, arms on the table, and spoke in a voice low and practiced. "The family who sold that horse," he began, "they don't like old business coming back to life." The man met his eyes without blinking. "That's so?" The sheriff nodded. "Names change, deeds change, but blood, that stays dangerous when it starts stirring up the past. And you're stirring." The man's voice was quiet, steady. "That bloodline's mine, they just don't know it yet." The sheriff sighed, not out of exasperation, something deeper, maybe regret, maybe tired resignation. "Look, I ain't here to tell you to leave. I'm just saying, there's folks in this town who've spent a long time pretending your family never existed. You start pulling back the curtain, they're gonna push." The man leaned back, the chair creaking under him. He looked out the window where the horse lay under the mesquite tree, swishing his tail lazily against the last of the flies. "I didn't come to fight," he said. "Didn't come to stir up names or claim land." "Then what did you come for?" He turned back to the sheriff, eyes dark and still. "I came for what they didn't burn." The sheriff studied him for a long moment. No accusation, no threat, just the weight of someone who'd seen too many men waste their last chance. Outside, the cicadas started up, filling the silence between them. The sheriff finally stood, tipping his hat but not offering his hand. "If trouble comes, you know where I'll be." The man nodded once. "Same place I've always been, on the side of what's right." The screen door creaked shut behind him, and his truck pulled away slow. The man didn't move, because some things once taken don't need to be chased down, they just need to be claimed. The smoke was still curling up from the back window when June pulled into town the next morning. Ash clung to the air like a warning, blackened paper drifting across Main Street like forgotten promises. The records office sat quiet now. Too quiet. No fire trucks. No crowd. Just the aftermath of something done in the dark, and meant to stay that way. Sheriff Dunn stood outside the doorway, jaw tight, one hand resting on his belt like it might keep him from saying what he didn't want to say. The charred doorframe sagged inward, a black mouth swallowing memory. June stepped out of her truck slow, boots crunching on broken glass. "Was it lightning?" she asked, though she didn't believe it. The sheriff shook his head. "No storm, no short, back window smashed in, accelerant in the carpet." She didn't answer, just looked at the building like it had betrayed her. Inside, what wasn't blackened was soaked. The metal file cabinets buckled. Paper had turned to paste or curled in on itself like dried leaves. But one thing, the most important thing, was gone. The man arrived 30 minutes later. He didn't ask questions, just walked through what remained of the room, scanning it like someone reading a battlefield after the guns went quiet. "What'd they take?" he asked. The sheriff rubbed the back of his neck. "Registry backups, DNA forms, everything from pre-as 85. Some of it we still had digitized. But," he stopped. "But the proof's gone." The man finished. The sheriff nodded. They walked to the back, where a pile of half-burned folders sat in a melted bin. June knelt, carefully sifting through what was left, her fingers blackening with soot. Then she paused. "Here," she whispered. She held up a photo. It was curled, edges burned, but still there, still whole. Blue smoke, the same crooked star on the forehead, the same fire in the stance. The man took it gently, looked at it like a relic pulled from a grave. "It's the only piece left," June said. "No," he replied, voice low. "There's one more, back at her property, under the tree, where flies no longer swarmed." The gelding stood, not proud, not strong, but upright, scarred, breathing, watching. The man walked to the fence line, photo still in hand, and held it up as if to compare. The horse blinked. Same line, same blood, same refusal to vanish. The sheriff stood behind him, arms folded. Someone wanted this gone, wiped clean. Name, line, truth. The man nodded, but they missed the one thing they couldn't burn. The sheriff tilted his head. "What's that?" The man watched the horse step forward, just once, slow but certain, living proof. And in that breath between ashes and sunrise, something stirred, not revenge, resurrection. The pasture stretched wide beneath a pale blue sky, the kind that promised heat later, but offered mercy for now. Dew clung to the wild grass, and the fence posts cast long shadows across the field. Somewhere beyond the rise, a bird called out low and slow, like it knew something sacred was about to begin. The gate creaked open. The man didn't speak, just stepped back and let the moment decide itself. The horse stood at the threshold, ribs still visible under a thin layer of new strength. Scars traced his flank like stories, and a fresh brand, just a small mark, nothing flashy, sat on his shoulder, declaring not ownership, but survival. He didn't bolt, didn't rear or race or test the wind. He stepped forward once, then again. The crowd, such as it was, no more than a dozen neighbors, a few curious ranch hands, and two dusty boys sitting cross-legged on the hood of a truck, watched in silence. No applause, no cameras, just eyes wide and quiet. The horse walked beside the man, not behind, not driven, beside. His steps were slow, sure, cautious in a way that spoke not of fear, but of respect, for the earth beneath him, for the sun above, for the man at his side. And the man, he carried no rope, no whip, only a hand near enough to be felt, and far enough to be chosen. They crossed the field like that, two figures in morning light, dust rising soft around their ankles, and as they did, the fairground memory faded, the heat, the shame, the broken thing left in the dirt. Now there was only breath and motion, and the hush that falls when something thought lost, walks again. June stood at the gate, arms crossed, jaw tight, not from doubt, from everything else, from knowing what it took to get here. Sheriff Dunn leaned on the post beside her, hat in hand, not because it was hot, but because it felt right. He's different, the sheriff muttered. No, June whispered, he's finally himself. When they reached the far side of the field, the horse stopped, turned, looked back at the people, then at the man. The man gave the smallest nod, and the horse just once let out a long quiet breath, not a snort, not defiance, relief. Then he lowered his head and began to graze. The crowd still didn't speak. A few hats came off, a few hands covered hearts without meaning to, because sometimes the most powerful thing isn't speed or fire or flight. Sometimes it's the quiet, steady choice to stay upright, to walk when the world expected you to fall, and to do it not alone. The mornings came softer now, the kind that didn't demand much, just the sound of coffee dripping in a tin pot, the creak of old boards on a porch, and the shuffle of hooves in dry grass. The man woke before the sun most days, not because he had to, because he wanted to. At the edge of the pasture, the horse waited, always in the same spot, head lifted, ears forward, not impatient, just sure that the man would come, that the silence between them still meant something. He never missed a day, didn't bring carrots or praise, didn't talk much. He'd walk to the fence, hand resting on the top rail, and the horse would lean in. Sometimes they'd stay like that for minutes, sometimes longer. No rush, no noise, just presence. The townsfolk started noticing. At first, they kept their distance, curious but cautious. But over time, they'd find reasons to drive past the pasture, slow down by the fence, maybe even stop for a moment. A few brought hay. A couple kids left apples on the fence post. One woman came with a sketch pad and drew the pair at dawn, her fingers smudged with charcoal in wonder. Nobody laughed anymore, not like they had that first day. The man with no hat, the horse they called a mercy case. That laughter had been swallowed by something deeper, something still. People stopped asking for the man's name, not out of disinterest, but respect. Around town, they just called him the one who stayed, the one who didn't walk past. He never raised his voice, never asked for credit, didn't show up at church socials or Friday markets, but he showed up where it counted, in that field, at that fence, for that horse. And over time, the lesson settled in. Some legacies don't wear ribbons, they don't hang on plaques or trot in parades. They live in the things most folks miss, the quiet gestures, the steady hand, the way one life bends to lift another. This wasn't about bloodlines anymore, it was about choice. The choice to kneel beside the broken, when every voice said walk on, the choice to stay, when leaving would have been easier, the choice to believe in something that had already been discarded. And the horse, he knew who knelt when no one else would, knew whose shadow meant safety, knew, in the way animals do, that he'd been seen, not as a burden, not as a mistake, but as something still worth saving. The man never said much, but if you stood close enough, early enough, you might hear it. The soft breath between man and horse, the quiet nod, the unspoken truth. Some things are worth kneeling for, and some souls, even the most broken, just need someone who doesn't look away. If this story moved you, don't scroll past. Like to honor those who choose to kneel beside the broken. Comment with "I won't look away" if you believe some things are still worth saving. Subscribe for more true to the bone stories of loyalty, justice, and second chances. This is Horse Tales of Wonder, where the forgotten get remembered.